Hey guys, it's Autumn here and welcome to the final week of Inktober. I'm going to apologize if my voice sounds rougher or weirder this video. I did come down with a little bit of post-con flu after SaratogaCon, so bear with me in that regard. But let's jump into the final part of our story. He found Brewer sitting in the tech room with some of the forensic guys, and they seemed to be in the middle of trying to trace Simon's watch from the cell towers near Mills. Brewer was intently studying the screen, face scrunched up similar to the way that Simon would look at Jack when he made a bad joke. Jack cleared his throat and looked at the screen himself, squinting and mentally reminding himself he should probably get his eyes checked. He shook the random thought away and watched as the program homed in on Simon's watch, taking a few moments to finally decide on a location. It pinged loudly as it sat in place above an old sawmill over by the bay. "We found him, Jack," Brewer gasped, leaning back in the chair so Jack could see. He nodded in response and immediately jumped into action. "We have a location on our kidnapping victim. I need every available officer to follow me, now," Jack called out, with the majority of the officers on this floor immediately jumping to action and following him down the elevators to their cars. They were an unstoppable army of justice that was being led by someone they had no idea was the only vigilante in the city, and one of the most wanted people in the state. They all got in their cars, sirens and lights blaring as they exited, and made their way hastily through the now dark city. All cars moved out of their way, pulling off to the side to watch the speeding procession of police cars rush through the city. They pulled up in a ring around the front of the sawmill, encircling the door. Jack and Brewer exited their car first, and they both picked a handful of officers to follow them into the dilapidated building. It was near silent inside, spare the light clunking of boots and shuffling of coats that couldn't be helped. Brewer took a group of men to the top floor, while Jack stayed on the lower level and searched for Simon. They cleared office after office, not finding any sign of Simon. It seemed like the building had been abandoned for a while. Slowly rotting wood desks and tipped-over chairs were present in nearly every room. Papers were scattered across the floor, and they looked like they'd been chewed on by mice. Every room they came across was empty and nearly identical. It was infuriating Jack to no end. Finally, they came upon the last room, and they could see there was light inside. Jack and another officer flanked the sides of the door. Jack nodded, and he kicked the door down, revealing a weakened Simon tied to a chair and two men sitting behind him. "You're under arrest for the kidnapping of Simon McBrien," Jack called out as they entered the room and encircled the men. They raised their hands and were quickly taken out of the room for a ride to the police station as Jack rushed to Simon's aid. "Jack," Simon croaked, still tied to the chair as they stormed in the room, guns blazing. Jack immediately softened upon seeing him injured and weak. Sweat was building upon his forehead, and his face was so pale it hurt Jack. He holstered his gun and ran to him. Simon, what's wrong? What did he do to you?" he asked, panicking as he pulled the ropes off of him. He was burning up as Jack took his hand. It was cold in the building, and Simon was slack and sweating profusely in the chair. He looked like he was using all his energy just to stay awake. "Poison. Cut on my cheek," he responded weakly, his eyes shutting, then fluttering back open again. The cut had a sickly green hue to it, and Jack scooped Simon up in his arms and turned to the door. He went to leave, looking intently at Simon, but stopped in his tracks when he saw Miller, holding a black and white mask in one hand and a loaded gun in the other, standing in the doorway. "Grr, McBrien, you always have to ruin my plans. Why can't you just die already?" Miller snarled, a strange, playful energy seeping into his tone. He aimed the gun and pulled back on the mask, a deranged visage. The gun was sure in its target. "Where's Dark Angel?" "Miller? This is ridiculous. What are you doing?" "Why are you here? Did you kidnap Simon?" Jack demanded, setting Simon carefully back on the chair, then turning to shield him with his body. Jack was suddenly very aware of the fact that he was wearing a t-shirt instead of his long-sleeved button-up from this morning. He'd gotten to change back after going to Krusty's, meaning that his tattoos were in full view. "Sorry, Jack, you're not in charge here. This is my playground, and I want answers now," he bellowed, his mannerisms shifting back to the weird ones he'd heard earlier on the phone. Jack frowned and took a wide stance, readying himself to fight. Miller was still aiming the gun at him, and his finger was on the trigger. "Miller, please, don't do something you'll regret, or make me do something I'll regret," Jack begged, muttering the last part more to himself than Miller. "I am no longer Miller! I am Misfit, and you will tell me who Dark Angel is now," he bellowed, releasing a shot that managed to catch Jack in his calf muscle. He cried out in pain, then looked at Miller with a grimace. "Sorry to burst your bubble, Misfit, but Dark Angel isn't coming. He's already here," Jack smirked, trying to ignore the feeling of blood dripping down his leg. He summoned his mask and placed it on his face, letting Misfit see his eyes glow ice blue. He summoned his whips and stood a wide stance. I'm Dark Angel. I'm not letting you hurt anyone ever again. Impossible, Misfit shrieked, taking another shot, though this time missing completely and hitting the wall instead. Jack heard people shouting above them and knew that Brewer was definitely aware of the situation. He let his whips fly quick, curling them around Misfit's feet and pulling him to the ground. He landed with a thud, letting loose a groan as he hit the hard concrete floor. His mask cracked, an audible sound, and began to fall away. The white half fell to the floor, leaving only the black half still covering his face. Misfit's face underneath was contorted in a strange smile, as if he was somehow winning. Jack tightened his whips and grabbed for his handcuffs in his belt. Braden Miller, you are under arrest for the kidnapping of Simon O'Brien, assault against a police officer, and for betraying everyone you have ever worked with, Jack stated, though he had tears welling in his eyes as he approached. Misfit growled, trying to get out of the whips, though instead ended up losing his gun as it spun out of his hands. Jack leaned down and cuffed him before roughly pulling him to his feet and de-animating his whips back into tattoos. As he finished, though not before he had time to remove his mask, Brewer rushed in, followed by another police officer who grabbed Miller and hauled him outside. Dark Angel? It's really you. Where's Jack? Brewer gasped. Before Jack could answer, Simon did it for him, snapping him back to the issue at hand. Jack, please, help, Simon cried from his place in the chair as Jack looked to Brewer. He removed his mask and de-animated it back in its place, then rushed over to Simon, though slower than he wished due to being shot. He looked at Brewer, who nodded, a sign of understanding between the two of them. Go get him help, Jack. We can handle a Misfit and his thugs, Brewer assured him. Jack smiled and nodded, taking off at a slow pace back out of the building. Jack limped to his car, Simon barely awake in his arms, and somehow managed to get both of them there. He rushed past multiple officers who offered assistance, but Jack had no time. He laid Simon across the front seat, wiping some of the sweat from his furrowed brow. He swung his leg, now heavily bleeding and in severe pain, into the car and sped towards the nearest hospital. It was 5 minutes away, but every minute was closer to death for both of them at the moment. Simon's head was resting in his lap as he did nearly 80 through Boston. Jack, he croaked, I don't want to die without letting you know. I don't blame you for any of this. Tears began to pour from Simon's eyes, and Jack was holding his back, trying to keep strong for Simon in case he couldn't even think it. Stop, Simon, I'm not going to let you die. Not tonight, he softly responded, petting the hair on Simon's head, tears beginning to flow as he realized how bad of shape Simon was in. He refused to let himself think what could happen if he didn't make it there in time. They had to make it there in time. I love you so much, Jack, so much, Simon sobbed, catching on each word as he tried to stay awake. He didn't want to die. He wasn't ready to leave. He didn't want to leave Jack alone. He couldn't leave Jack all alone to deal with things. He stared up into Jack's eyes, pure ice blue, as he sped through the streets of Boston in his Bentley, trying to keep focus on something as his eyes flittered shut again, staying shut this time. No, 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 no! You're not going anywhere, Simon! Jack screamed as his eyes glowed with blue energy. He nailed the accelerator, the speed indicator jumping all the way to 105 as he swerved into the hospital parking lot. Simon was breathing. Barely. As Jack pulled his limp form from the car and methodically walked his way into the hospital. Each of his steps was intentional and painful as he entered. He looked around for a nurse, somebody, anybody who could save Simon. He was sweating, covered in blood and their tears, as he approached the counter and begged for someone to save Simon. Jack's jeans were caked with blood and he was continuing to bleed as he watched, seemingly in slow motion, as nurses and doctors swarmed Simon and began to check vitals and save him from the poison. He fell to his knees as they wheeled him into the ICU, letting the tears flow as he sobbed on the cold floor of the hospital, hoping that his sweet little librarian, his honey bun, and his soulmate would make it through this. Eventually, a nurse persuaded him to let them help him. They removed the bullet from his calf, something that should have hurt, but he couldn't feel at all, his emotional breakdown leaving him emotionless for a short while. It was an uncomfortable experience, though, having a bullet removed from his leg and something he hoped he never had to deal with again. They stitched the wound shut, covered it in bandages, and led him to where Simon was in the ICU. His wound would heal in 2 days, far faster than most humans, and he would surprise every nurse that looked at the wound. The hallways on the way there were silent and grim, with more than a few families sitting in rooms crying or watching over a hurt loved one, and Jack was about to join that group of hopeful and heartbroken individuals. Simon was hooked up to machines, but the nurse who had let him in told him that Simon's heart was pumping by itself and he was breathing with no assistance, and that was the good thing. The chair in the room wasn't comfortable by any standard, but it was somewhere to sit and relax, where both of them would be safe. Jack quickly fell asleep in the chair and didn't wake up until Simon did the next morning. Jack, sweetheart, are you alright? That looks rather uncomfortable. Simon's raspy voice questioned the next morning, causing Jack to wake with a start and fall out of the chair and onto the floor. which was still very cold underneath him. His hoodie, the black one he stashed in his work bag, was laid out on top of him as he woke up, and the only person who would touch his things was Brewer. He had deduced that Brewer had probably come by and checked on them and left it for him, though why Brewer didn't wake him was beyond him. He stretched on the floor before reassuming a seat and scooting closer to Simon. It was rather uncomfortable, he grumbled, but quickly changed into concerned husband mode. Simon, are you feeling all right? How are you doing? Has the doctor stopped in yet? Simon responded with a light chuckle and a groan as he adjusted himself in bed. I'm feeling far better than I was last night, that's for sure. Oh, and the doctor came in a little while ago and said that the poison was completely clear for my system, but I would probably need to stay in the hospital another day or so for observational purposes, he informed his concerned-looking lover, who seemed to be analyzing every part of his face. The cut on his face would heal, though at that moment it was glaring angrily at Jack. They sat and talked and worked through everything that had happened the last 2 days, being honest with each other with how they were handling everything. The answer for both was not incredibly well, but they knew they would get through it together. The next 2 days went by smoothly, with the doctors only keeping Simon to ensure the gash on his cheek wasn't infected and that there were no residual effects from the poison. He gained his strength back quickly, with him getting up and walking on their second day there to go get lunch with Jack, and him leading Jack down 3 flights of stairs when they exited to go home. Home was a strange thought at the moment, as they hadn't been home in what felt like ages. Their spacious home in the countryside seemed a million miles away, as they thought of Simon's personal library and all their houseplants that had been simply forgotten, left to gather dust the last few days. Though it was a welcoming thought, thinking of sleeping in their own beds and taking a much-needed shower. And Simon was excited to be going home. He was the picture of health as he slid into the driver's side of his precious car, the Bentley that had never failed him. Jack thought it funny, at that moment, the similarity of where they were sitting to one of Simon's favorite shows. Though, instead of the red-haired, black-winged demon driving the car with the soft, white-haired librarian angel sitting shotgun, the black-winged vigilante was sitting shotgun with his soft librarian husband driving. It made him chuckle as he leaned in to kiss Simon on the cheek, then pulled back again to talk to him, clearing his throat. So, Angel, can I tempt you to a spot of lunch? Jack asked, attempting his best British accent as he emulated the demon from the show. Simon turned to him, his face bright as he smiled at him, immediately recognizing the quote. Temptation accomplished. What about the Ritz? I do believe a table for 2 has miraculously opened up, Simon quoted back, looking rather happy with himself. Jack smiled at him, nodding his head in agreement, knowing full well that their Ritz was home, and that Jack had definitely just gotten stuck making lunch for the 2 of them when they got home. And hoped they hadn't left anything to get grossly ripe in their time away. Thank you guys so much for listening to this story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope to, at some point, post the entire, I guess, manuscript, in a sense, so you guys can read it if you want to. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a wonderful Halloween. Bye, everyone! Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to check out another one over there, and if you want to see the full playlist for this series, check out over here. Thank you for watching, and subscribe if you like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone!